Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Packet Hacking Village at DEF CON 25 in Las Vegas, Nevada. First and foremost, on a personal note, we cannot thank you enough for all the support, for your contributions for all these years. If it wasn't for all of you and for your support, we would not be here. We're such a big village and such a strong support. So we are very, very, very grateful for that. The Wall Chief's mission is, and has always been, on security awareness. This year, the Packet Hacking Village have a number of events and learning opportunities, including the venerable Hacker Detective, which is in Neapolitan, and Capture the Packets. We also have the fantastic slate of DJs to keep the village entertained. Okay? Even nice and entertained and lively. The Cheer Cheap City and Honeypots are back. We are also very excited that we have something new in store for this year. Hands-on workshops, as there is a tremendous demand for training and continuing education in this field. We hope that you will take advantage of the many opportunities here at the Packet Hacking Village and ultimately at DEF CON to learn, to collaborate, and to be inspired. And of course, here we are at the speaker workshops. This is a very special year for this event, the speaker workshop, as part of the Packet Hacking Village, as this is the 5th anniversary of the speaker workshops. We are going to kick it off right off the bat with a very, very special keynote. Dan Geer said in this keynote at Black Hat 2014, and I quote, "Cybersecurity is now a riveting concern, a top issue in many venues more important than this one." Or as Matt Blaze said bluntly at the 11th hole last year, 2016 in New York City, and I quote, "We are now in a national security crisis, cybersecurity crisis." So what does this have to do with the keynote this morning? There are many people starting to enter or study cybersecurity, which is very, very welcoming to see. However, the body of knowledge is now too deep and intimidating to grasp, and history can be easily forgotten. Now, how did we get into this mess in the first place? In May of 1998, a group of hackers testified in front of a panel of U.S. senators. The hacker group was blocked, based out of Boston, Massachusetts. One of the members of Block who testified was Wysopal. Block warned that the internet, the software, and the hardware are not safe, and security is an afterthought. Their warning was a disaster foretold, and as we all know, tragically ignored. On a side note, please read the wonderful Washington Post article, well, a disaster foretold and ignored. Their warning and efforts also paved way for many of our careers and lifestyles in this field, including mine, and why many of us are here today at DEF CON. It is my fantastic honor to introduce you all to the keynote speaker this morning at kick off the speaker workshop with Wysopal.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you for that very warm welcome. And it's a pleasure to be here speaking today. My first time speaking at the Packet Hacking Village. And you know, since it was the 25th anniversary of DEF CON, I've been coming since DEF CON 4. I think I missed a few along the way, but I thought, you know, why not have a bit of a retrospective to talk about how we got here and what an impact hackers had on the security industry, and really made the security industry what it is today. It would be very, very different if it wasn't for the input of people who were doing independent research and taking that hacker mindset. So I'll start off where Ming started off here with This was the picture of the gang of us testifying before the Senate in May 1998. If you can't recognize me, my hair's a little different. Still the goatee. I was a little bigger back then, but you probably can't see it, but on the placards there in the front, you can see Can, Kingpin, Mudge, Well Pond, Space Road. And there's kind of an interesting aspect to this is when we got invited to come speak, we said, well, we will only do it under our hacker aliases. And they said, why? And they said, because we have day jobs. And back in 1998, if you were, called a hacker and you had, hands on keyboards at some in an IT admin responsibility, they might say, we don't want someone like that with that kind of responsibility. You might lose your job, And so that was the mindset back then because it hadn't changed yet. I don't think you'd have that today if you said, hey, I call myself a hacker and I go to DEF CON. They'd probably say, hey, we need to give you more responsibility, right? But back then, it wasn't like that. But how did we get to this point? This is around 1998. Things had to happen before that, before we got invited. And what I like to say is, we made trouble, right? We got noticed. And how did we do that? We made people upset, right? We didn't break the law, as far as I can talk about today. No, we didn't. But we did make people upset, right? People didn't like the idea of full disclosure. Microsoft really didn't like that. They didn't like us putting out documentation how their password storage mechanism sucks. They didn't like that because then all their customers, including banks and the DoD, would say, Microsoft, your software is insecure, it sucks, fix it. And that costs them money, and it makes them look bad. By causing trouble and causing pain for other organizations, we actually raised a lot of awareness to the kind of problems that were out there. And we kind of stumbled upon this. I can't say that there was a master plan. We just started taking our research, and instead of just sort of posting it to BugTrack and being very academic about it, we decided that we really should be more consumer advocate focused. We should take the research, and instead of being just pure technical research, we should think of it as, vendors are doing bad things that are harming consumers, right? And that really started around 95 or so, and it changed it from like, oh, I know how to break into your system, to, wait a minute, the vendors are shipping code that is causing this problem for their customers. And I think that was a big sort of paradigm shift that caused hackers to be that that force that was siding with the user, right? You fight for the user, what is that, the Tron line? And so by sort of causing trouble, we got noticed, and that is how the Senate came to us saying, you guys have an angle on this that's different than what we're hearing from the big vendors. It's different than what we're hearing from the government accounting office, which is really just going through a checklist saying you didn't configure this correctly, you didn't configure this correctly. And that's how the government thought about it. And we basically said, hey, the vendors can do better. They can ship things that are secure by default. They can ship things that aren't as broken. The problem was the vendors didn't know how to do that yet, but we'll get there. So now I just want to go back to what the computer security was before hackers came onto the scene and started to inject themselves into the dialogue. We had the famous Orange Book, Common Criteria, which was basically a lot of things that you should do to build a secure system. You need all those features and functionality. You need your encryption, your authorization. You need your logging and your auditing and all of that. But it left out fact that there could be mistakes in the software, that the engineers might actually make mistakes. They didn't even think about that. It's not in there. This is not in that book at all. Who has software that has bugs in it? Software has always had bugs in it, yet this was completely ignored in the Orange Book. It's like the software was perfect. You'd have great security if you followed the Orange Book if you made perfect software. Well, we all know that doesn't exist, right? So that was just a gaping huge hole that hackers came on the scene and said, you guys have this gaping hole in the way you're building systems. You're building systems with bugs in them. And we're going to exploit those bugs, and we're going to bypass all of your controls. The other aspect of the way computer security was thought of was CERT. And CERT was formed after the Morris worm in order to, basically put information out there when there was attacks that happened. The problem was this was really a government funded and a government organized with a government mindset. And the mindset back then was sort of like the intelligence communities today is like, yeah, we'll hoover up a lot of information, we'll analyze it, and then we'll give out the information to you that we think you should have, right? So basically CERT was, they wanted to be in control of vulnerability information, weaknesses in software, weaknesses in configuration. They wanted to be in control and manage how the public knew about weaknesses. So if you reported something to CERT in 1993, it might just go into a black hole, and they might stop communicating with you. They said, hey, we're the good guys. Send the information to us, and we'll make sure that security gets better. But what we found out was we would send them information, and we didn't know what happened to it. We didn't even know if they contacted the vendor. We don't even know if the vendor patched the software or what patch was available to fix the issue we might have told them. So it was a total black hole, and it didn't work. So that government mindset of closed, controlled information just doesn't work when it comes to securing our world. So in 1993, I was just starting to get involved with the Loft at that time, and I got introduced to this paper, Improving the Security of Your Site by Breaking Into It. And to me, this was a seminal paper. If you've never read it, go out there and read it, because this is what they really codified how the hacker mindset can be used to secure systems. Basically, what this paper said was, why don't you study how your systems are being compromised? Look at the technique they're using to compromise the system, and then basically test all your other systems to see if they have that problem. It seems completely obvious today, right? But back in 1993, this was actually a new concept. People who did security for a corporate network did not do this. They didn't do this at all. And so what Dan Farmer and Weetzy Venema did was they started collecting information about how systems were compromised. It was a trust violation with, exploiting trust with our hosts. Was it a weak password? Was it a well-known bug? And they started to script these up and put them together. And what they really did was they made information security a participatory sport. There was this give and take between the attacker and the defender, where the defender can learn from the attacker. And so studying the way attackers behave, or simulating how an attack might happen, or practicing red teaming, right, were all things that hackers brought to the table. And they made security an active participatory activity as opposed to a static configuration of features and technology. So around this time, we started to see the first hacker tools. We have so many tools today. It's completely awesome how many people write great tools and put them out there. But these are some of the very first ones that came to the table. I was looking sort of for what was the first hacker mindset kind of tool, and I think it really was Crack by Alec Muffet. He came up with the idea that you could test the strength of your passwords and see if they're guessable. right? It makes perfect sense, right? Like, why not see if your users are using weak passwords and tell them to fix it, right? But again, it takes that hacker mindset to do that. The normal security person's mindset didn't do that. It took the hacker mindset to kind of change that. And this was a radical notion back then. Again, it seems completely obvious today, but it really was a radical notion. It was so radical that Randall Schwartz, who was assistant administrator at Intel, got fired for running crack on the systems that he was responsible for. He was responsible for the security of the system. He ran crack because he had read about the tool, he understood it, it made sense. I'm going to see if any of my users are using guessable passwords. And someone caught him running this process and doing this, and he got fired and charged with a felony for running a security a hacker tool, right? It wasn't considered a security tool. The next example here is a program called Satan that Dan Farmer and Weedsy Venema wrote, and they were automating all the things that they were learning from attackers. Like I was saying, you know, secure your network by breaking into it. They said, why don't we automate that, and why don't we script it up? So Dan wrote this tool and released it, and he called it Satan. I'm not sure exactly what, a system administrator toolkit or something like that. And once he released it, he got fired from his job at SGI. He was a programmer at SGI, and they saw that he released a hacker tool, and they just fired him. They said, we can't have a hacker working at our company that's releasing these bad hacker tools. This was really the first vulnerability scanner. Now it's a huge market. It's a standard thing that you do. But there was someone who had to write the first one, and the person who wrote the first one got fired. So I think some of the theme that I'm trying to bring across is progress is made by people who are making trouble. They're doing things that other people don't like. It's not illegal, but they just don't like it. They don't like the idea that these tools are out there that can break into their system because they don't understand. And you know, over the past 20 years, we've gotten more people to understand, but there's still things that we have to do to make trouble, to keep pushing the envelope. And then Hobbit wrote Netcat in 1996, which, if you haven't played with Netcat, at least read the README file. It really is, I mean, I'm sure here people at the Packet Hacking Village have played with Netcat, but the README file is just an awesome look into the mind of someone deconstructing TCP/IP and sockets. As far as I know, no one's been fired directly for using Netcat, but things could still happen. And then on the information resources side, who was sharing the information about all these issues, how attackers were working? It was the hacker community. It was BugTrack, which started in 1993, the same year that DEF CON started in 1993. And that really was the birth of a new form of information sharing that wasn't controlled by the government, wasn't controlled by CERT. It was people talking to other people. And that's really what started the openness that we needed to secure our environment. The next step in this was hackers starting to write commercial software. This was hackers sort of moving into the commercial space. And I think really one of the first commercial software written by a hacker was the Internet Security Scanner by Chris Klaus. And we at the Loft started to think, hey, we could make a piece of software that is targeted at system administrators. You know, most tools that hackers write for other hackers are command line tools. You know, Alec Moffat's Crack was a command line tool. What we learned was Windows NT administrators can't use that, right? So we open sourced our command line version, but we built a version with the GUI so that actual Windows NT administrators could use it, and we sold that. And we said, hey, wait a minute, we can actually make money, building the tools to help secure systems. So this, again, was another change of just becoming more of the security industry at the time. And then around 1998, we started to really interface with Microsoft, and we really started to tell Microsoft what was wrong with their networking protocols, what was wrong with the way that you were building things. And we came up with the notion, much like Dan Farmer and Wheatsy's notion of improving your network by breaking into it. We said, well, wait a minute, what about improving the security of a product by breaking into it? So instead of looking at the whole network and finding the weaknesses in the network, why not look at look at one piece of software, put that software in a lab environment with your debugger, your packet capture, and other reverse engineering tools, and start to think, hey, we can actually secure software by trying to break into the software. So to me, this was sort of the beginning of the process that a lot of companies use today to actually try to secure their software before they ship their software to their customers. But at the same time, the security industry still isn't woken up. If you were working and doing security in like 1998, 1999, they're still doing this. They're selling security features. That's the only thing that they knew how to do to secure a network, or selling compliance. And we all know that this just gets bypassed, right? You just bypass all those things, and you ignore all the compliance issues, right? Like you don't even look at the book and say, hey, let's see if they check this box. I'm going to attack and see if they check that box. That's just not how the hacker mindset works. So compliance is completely orthogonal to the hacker process. So in 2000, we decided to basically, a lot of people called it selling out, and this is what we did at the Loft. We said, let's take all the things we're doing here, the tools we're building, the processes we're using to reverse engineer software, to pen test networks. Let's see if we can just do this as a business. And the headlines were pretty, we're going to use good hackers to fight the bad hackers. People like to put things into simple, easy boxes, right, for the general public. But the idea was that we were going to take all the things that we were doing that we had sort of created over the last few years, and we were going to sell those as services to customers. So I don't think we were the first company to do commercial pen testing, but it definitely put it on the map that you could use these techniques to secure your network and secure your software. So some of the things that we did different that other security consultancies weren't doing at the time, but seem totally normal today. This was completely new. We conducted our own vulnerability research. It was a consultancy that had people going out and pen testing, and people back at the office building tools and doing research. And we came up with the concept of, we can help you secure your application by breaking into it for you and telling you how we did it. And then other companies started to follow. You probably have heard of Guardant, went to VeriSign, Foundstone, went to McAfee. I think McAfee still calls their adversarial security services Foundstone. And then shortly after that, we had all kinds of worms that were affecting Microsoft products. Code Red, SQL Slammer. I mean, basically, it was pretty much of a disaster. If you were a Windows NT admin or Windows 2000 admin in 2002, you were like patching IIS like on a monthly basis just so you didn't get a worm attack. It was really bad. So Bill Gates came out with the Trusted Computing Memo, and he said, we're going to stop everything. We're going to stop building software the way we used to build it. We're going to train all of our engineers on writing secure software, because they had a book, Writing Secure Code, I think it's called. We're going to train them on that. and then we're going to build secure software. The problem was they all read the book and they all got the training, and then they went back to their desks and they still didn't know how to build secure software. They thought they could do it, but they couldn't. They didn't have the capability of making sure that the software they were releasing was actually secure, because there was nothing in their they had secure coding guidelines, but there was nothing in their process which was adversarial in nature. There was no process of testing. There was no process of attacking. So they didn't actually know how to write secure software. So what did Microsoft do? They hired a company started by hackers to come and teach them how to secure their software. So Microsoft hired At Stake. I was there for months at a time, helping them completely rewrite IIS, helping them secure Exchange, SQL Server. We taught them how to threat model. They had no concept of threat modeling at the time. You know, Microsoft likes to talk about how, you know, they have Stride and they have all these threat modeling standards. They learned it from hackers. Hackers taught them how to do that. What was the hacker mindset for trying to break into a piece of software? So this came from hackers. They didn't understand exploiting heap overflows. Their engineers just didn't get it. We had to teach them that because they weren't going to fix buffer overflows on the heap because they didn't think it was exploitable. They didn't have any concept of fuzzing software. Dave Eitel, who's now founder of Immunity, wrote the Spike fuzzer while on the Microsoft campus because he wanted to fuzz the software that we were testing for Microsoft, and he said, let me write a general purpose fuzzer called Spike, and then he later open sourced it. One kind of funny aspect of this was Dave wanted to do this using his Linux laptop, and Microsoft explicitly said, you can't bring a Linux laptop onto the Microsoft campus. We had to get special permission from like some senior vice president, and it had to only be in this room, and it was tightly controlled. They were afraid that like if a little of that software, that GPL software somehow got onto the Microsoft network, they would just their lawyers had them so scared that like all their software would be GPL'd. It was like the GPL virus is what they called it, and they thought that using a Linux laptop was a really scary thing. You know, now Azure, you know, you can spin up Linux boxes, right? So it's taken them a long time to get over it. We taught them how to do things like find the attack surface. We would do threat modeling with the engineers, and they would tell us about all the inputs into the program, what other components it talked to, and then we would run something like sysinternals, Process Explorer, and we'd be like, you didn't mention this name pipe. You know, you didn't mention that it read from this file. And the people who built the software didn't actually understand how their software worked because they were calling into libraries that were doing things that they didn't understand. So we taught them how to go to the ground truth to actually look at what the software was doing, right? Take a reverse engineering process. They could only think with a forward engineering process. And so the engineers at Microsoft didn't even know how their software worked. And so we taught them how to do that. It's really interesting that Microsoft actually ended up buying the company that made sysinternals. And then this was sort of finally, you know, we look at the Microsoft SDLC as the standard. They like to say we have a great process for building software securely. And they were the main contributors to ISO 27734, which is the process for building software. Where did they learn most of the stuff that's in there? They learned it from hackers. So we could say that if you think your software is more secure today than it was, 15 years ago, it's because hackers taught software vendors how to secure their software. So, basically I take this to about 2003 or so, where sort of the modern era of security and building software started and down to where we are today. So penetration testing
once was a scary thing that you hired hackers for, and you had to get special permission for it. It's now a requirement, right? If you're a financial services, you have some certain compliance. You need to pen test your applications, right? So now it's a requirement. People have a product security response team to communicate with hackers, right? And developers are using hacker techniques as they build the software to test it in order to make sure that that software is secure. So today we really do have securing your product by trying to break into it. And I'm also happy to say that bug bounties came because the idea of someone poking around in your software and informing you about it became a legitimate good thing that companies wanted to reward. So this is really full circle from 20 years ago when there were people that would report bugs and they would be threatened, like Mike Lynn was threatened from Cisco, and Dmitry Skylarov was threatened, arrested because he came to DEF CON about 15 years ago. He was arrested because he was going to talk about bugs in DRM. So we've come full circle from people notifying of vulnerabilities and potentially getting arrested to today. It's all a good thing. So now I want to take us to today, and where have we come? Where have we come today? It still looks pretty bad out there. I mean, if you see what the Petya ransomware worm was able to do on modern networks, huge companies like Maersk and FedEx, the Ukrainian government, it's still pretty bad out there, right? The really crazy thing is nation states are pretending to be hackers. I don't know for sure if a nation state released Petya or not Petya, what you want to call it, but I find it very interesting that whatever their motives and what they were trying to do, they were trying to look like criminal hackers, right? So this is now, we've come to this point that this is just a part, even people that are doing offensive operations for governments, they want to look like us, right? They want to look like the people that go to DEF CON. They think that's how you hide yourself. And today hackers are insiders, right? We could be sellouts, we could be insiders, whatever you want to call it. I put the names of some of the companies up here that people have disclosed. I know that the three other guys up there, I know where they work, but they like to keep it a little bit on the down low. Some people are still really paranoid. But hackers are insiders. Mudge worked for DARPA. He was a government employee working for DARPA, funding, using his insider position to use DARPA funds to fund hacker style projects, like Charlie Miller and Chris Velasek hacking the Jeep was funded through DARPA. So now that we're insiders, we're really in powerful positions to actually change things. And that's a good thing. It was basically Window Snyder and Katie Masuris who over time got Microsoft to even do a bug bounty program, right? And they came from the hacker community. And we all know insiders are more powerful, right? But we're getting old, right? We're old insiders, right? We need the next generation to keep doing what we did. Right, we need people to still keep making trouble, and I do still see people out there making trouble. I don't know. Most people have probably heard of Justine Bone and her company MedSec, which caused a lot of trouble for St. Jude Medical Devices by selling their research around how their pacemaker had vulnerabilities that could kill someone, selling their research to a hedge fund that shorted the stock. That's making trouble. That's trying to change things up. They didn't do anything illegal, right? There is a lawsuit out there, but I think they'll probably be okay. And they brought a new mindset into thinking about how can we fix the market around cybersecurity. For a long time, it's been a vendor-customer relationship where the vendor decides how much security they're going to put in their products, and the consumers have no visibility into it. And it's kind of a lemon market, right? Like the consumer has no power over making their world a more secure place in general, the average person. And what MedSec did was, by bringing in the investor community, brought in another party. They brought in the owners of the companies, the investors who own parts of these public companies, and brought them to the table and woke them up to say, hey, maybe the security of these products is going to change how much money I make with this company. So it's not the people who are the employees of the company that were necessary in control. Now, what MedSec did was brought in this other party, the investor community, and we're starting to see more of that now. Ponemon Institute came out with a report showing how stocks dip after major vulnerabilities are announced. And the study broke down how much it dipped and for how long the stock dipped. And it turned out that companies that had a very good security, mature security posture and had a really good response, their stock dipped less, half as much, and for half as much time. Whereas companies that were very immature from a security perspective and had a really bad response, their stock dipped twice as much and lasted twice as longer. My analysis on that is the investor community sees the vulnerability from the mature company as a black swan, right? It's something that, it happens to everybody, but it's not going to be a regularly occurring event. But when it happens to a company that doesn't have a good response and can't talk about how they're securing their software, the investor community thinks, well, this is going to happen again and again and again. This is actually going to damage the brand and hurt the company. So we're starting to get the investors that own these companies to think about security. So it's still early days, but I think that that's an interesting new angle. So what I want to ask you to do is to make me nervous. I want you to go out there and do something. I don't want you to break the law, but I want you to do something that after you do it, I say, I don't know if that's a good idea. That was my reaction to when I first saw the MedSec incident. I said, really, are we going to go down this path? This is going to tarnish the research community. This is going to make hackers look bad. And then I thought about it, and I said, maybe we should give this a chance. Maybe we should let this play out. Maybe there's some big benefit down the road to this. Someone's trying something. But it made me nervous at the beginning. It really did. And so that's my call to you, is to do something that makes me nervous. Because I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot. I made other people nervous. But do something that makes me nervous. And I think that will be pushing the envelope. So I just want to finish here with something a little bit practical, and a way that we all can influence the organizations we're in, is the concept of security champions. Now, I'm in the application security business. I help companies build secure software, and part of it is to build that security culture. The security team can't do it all. Pen testers can't do it all. Hackers can't do it all. We have to enlist the masses. We have to get them to understand the security mindset. And so the notion of security champion is, take the example of a company that builds software. In every development team or every Scrum team in that company, identify an individual who has the aptitude and the interest and maybe learning a little bit more about security. So there's software developers, their day job. Get them interested in security. Get them some extra training. Do some reverse engineering with them. Do a capture the flag exercise with them. Get them interested in security. And if you can get one person in each development team interested in security, it has a huge impact across the organization. Because there's just not enough security people, and there's a lot of people building software out there. And I think you can take this to other places to educate people. So I think that is something that we all have a responsibility to do where we work or in our lives, is to educate. Because it can't be an us and them, I know it's called the wall of sheep, and there's a bunch of sheep out there, and then there's the wolves, right? But it'd be great if we could get some of those sheep more educated. So with that, I'm going to end it there. There's my contact info if you want to contact me. I don't know, Ming, if I went over time, if we have any time for questions.
We do have time for a few questions, and if you have a question for Chris, and please have, we definitely welcome you because this is a fantastic opportunity right now. The mic is all yours.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Chris, my name's David. I'm from New York. I wanted to ask you, I've read news articles that talk about how difficult it is for companies to keep themselves secure, that they're effectively gladiators in this pit going against everyone out there, malicious and hacktivists and all the like. Have you heard any theories or any proposals that are convincing for how companies can share their data potentially with one another to say, we found this vulnerability, this is something perhaps to look for in your work, and kind of help bridge that gap and help them unify?
So what you're really talking about is information sharing. And I'm a huge proponent of fully open information sharing. I don't like all these little pockets of groups, government groups, or just financial services groups where they share stuff amongst themselves. I think that's incredibly inefficient, right? The idea of DEF CON, the idea of bug track, were to make information sharing completely open. So I think we should have as open as possible, right? Information sharing. I don't care if the adversaries get the information too. As long as the defenders work on that information, it's better. The problem with open information sharing is the adversaries take advantage of it and the defenders don't. Yeah. If the defenders took advantage of it, it would be fine. So I'm all for as much open information sharing as we can have.
Thank you.
Anyone else for a question? Please feel free. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Do you think that yourself, other members of Loft, and other individuals in the early 90s and late 90s received the reward and recognition that they should, given what they did for the security sector today? And just for the record, I don't, unless you convince me otherwise.
I don't know. I think, I'm a pretty humble guy. I don't need any more reward. I've been very successful in my career. I've met a lot of great people. I get to stand up here and talk with you and meet you, so I'm fine myself. I don't think I need a Presidential Medal of Honor or anything like that.
Would the rest of Loft say that as well?
Some of them probably would have a different answer. Yeah.
So really quick, what spaces do you think really need to be made nervous these days?
Could you repeat the end?
Sure. What places or what sectors do you think really need to be made more nervous these days?
I missed the last part again.
No problem. What places or what sectors do you think really need to be made more nervous right now?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was missing the nervous word. That's a good question. I know the government is already nervous. I think it's the IoT sector. I don't think they're getting quite the feedback loop that they need to. I think that people are just shipping products and ignoring things. I think the noise level has to be raised there. We saw the Mirai botnet was sort of a wake-up call. I don't think that changed how people are manufacturing these inexpensive IoT devices that, it might cost $50, but it causes a world of hurt, It's sort of like, dumping your toxic waste in the swamp, right? Just because something is cheap to do or make doesn't mean it doesn't have really bad consequences. So, yeah, let's make them nervous. Maybe one more?
One more question? Absolutely welcome. Absolutely welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for the talk. That's a great talk. I want to ask you, sometimes when you get a software, you want to reverse. When you look at the agreement, one of them is do not reverse engineer. Do you observe it and sit on your hand, or you just go ahead and do it anyway?
I would go and do it anyway. I think, you can't ask for permission, right? They're not going to give you permission. So I would go ahead and do it anyway. You know, as a company, it's something that I can't do at work. I need to follow those rules myself. But I don't think we would have gotten anywhere with making better products unless people did that. So again, that's along the lines of making people angry.
Can you share with us where weld pond came from, or is that completely taboo?
No, I can share. It's actually a fairly boring story, but quickly. So the first BBS I connected to, that it had a requirement. I think it was called the Works in Lexington, Massachusetts. Jason Scott was the guy who does textfiles.com. Jason Scott, you probably all know, was the sysop. The BBS was set up that it said no real names. You can't use your real name on the BBS. You got to put in a fake name. So when I signed up for an account, I was like, oh, I don't want to spend time thinking of some cool name. You know, so all I did was I looked above my desk and I had a map of the Boston area, and I just put my finger up there and I put my finger on Weld Pond, which is it's a pond in Dedham, Massachusetts. And that's where I came up with the name. I didn't think I'd be using it 24 years later. So that's where it came from.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much. When we received the CFP, we were like, oh my God. You know, it's a tremendous honor for you to give the keynote here at the Packet Hacking Village and speaker workshops. I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've done for not only the community here, but also for me personally in my career as well too. And I'm totally very, very grateful for that. So thank you for everything that you've done for the community and for me personally. And I also want to pay a very special thank you to each and every one of you here who was at this talk. Just looking at this room right now this is my 11th DEF CON. And it really, really does feel like going back to the old days when I first got when I got to a talk at not Alexis Park, but at the Riviera. I mean, DEF CON talks, if you could believe, were just this big. So just like going back to the old days. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Chris.